The wind moaned through the Bavarian fields, carrying the sound of boots crunching over frozen soil. Inside the farmhouse, a lantern flickered as if warning the walls to listen. Andreas Gruber leaned on the wooden doorframe, his breath fogging the cold air. He swore he heard steps above, pacing in circles beneath the roof beams. His wife, Chiselia, told him it was the wind again, same as last week, but she wouldn't meet his eyes as she spoke. In the attic, a soft, dragging sound moved from one end to the other. Hay shifted, as though something unseen had made a bed for itself. Little Joseph slept in the cradle by the stove, his fingers curling toward the heat. The fire popped once, sending sparks like nervous thoughts. Outside, the dog began barking toward the barn, relentless and hoarse. Andreas lit a lantern and whispered a prayer that didn't sound convincing. He checked the locks twice and stared at the footprints leading from the woods. They stopped at his doorstep and vanished into nothing. In the morning, smoke refused to rise straight from the chimney. The air felt thick, as though the house itself was holding its breath. Chiselia the younger helped her mother hang laundry that wouldn't dry. The sheets twisted like they were trying to tell her something. Neighbors had started avoiding the path past Hinterkaifeck after sunset. They said strange lights blinked in the fields, like lanterns searching for their owners. Inside, the attic noises came again, deliberate, unhurried steps. The family stopped talking mid-meal, listening to every plank creak. Andreas climbed up with an axe handle, whispering, "Show yourself." The silence that answered him was somehow heavier than footsteps. He found nothing but disturbed straw and a faint smell of smoke. Still, he felt the kind of cold that starts beneath the ribs. That night, the cattle kicked their stalls until morning. When Chiselia checked, their eyes looked too human in the lamplight. Someone had moved a hay fork again, leaving it upright like a cross. Andreas swore he hadn't touched it, but no one argued anymore. Maria Baumgartner, the new maid, arrived that Friday with her trunk and a nervous smile. She noticed the footprints too, but said nothing. The family welcomed her with stew and polite silence. She didn't know yet that Hinterkaifeck had stopped being a home weeks ago. As night fell, the wind carried the faint sound of humming, a woman's voice. It came from the direction of the barn where no one stood. Maria set her candle by the bed and crossed herself 3 times. The flame leaned sharply left, then steadied as if obeying something unseen. Andreas made one last round through the house, checking locks, checking shadows. He paused beneath the attic door, hearing a sigh that wasn't his. He muttered that he'd fix the roof in the morning, though it wasn't broken. Some lies are meant for comfort, even when no one's listening. Before dawn, Chiselia woke, crying that she'd dreamed of a headless man. Her mother hushed her, but tears came anyway, silent and clean. The rooster crowed late that morning, unsure of the sun. Fog pressed low, like wool soaked in milk. Andreas went to fetch wood and found the barn door ajar. The latch hung broken, edges fresh and splintered. He stepped inside, lantern raised, expecting a thief. Instead, he found silence pretending to be sleep. The cattle stirred restlessly, nostrils flaring. He thought he saw movement near the hayloft. Just a flutter, just enough. Behind him, something exhaled softly, warm against his neck. He turned too slow to see anything but dust. Chiselia called from the kitchen window, asking if all was well. He didn't answer, but she saw him looking upward toward the loft. That afternoon, footprints reappeared in the snow, one set leading from the woods again. This time they led all the way to the barn and stopped inside. Maria asked permission to visit her sister on Sunday. Chiselia said yes, though she doubted either of them would leave the property again. At supper, the dog lay silent for the first time in weeks. Its ears twitched toward the ceiling, not the door. Andreas admitted he'd been hearing whispers in the attic for months. His wife crossed herself mid-sentence, spilling the salt. That night, the lamp burned out twice despite fresh oil. Each time it died, a faint knock came from upstairs, as if counting. Maria found small straw piles behind the kitchen door, shaped like nests. She swept them away, but they returned every morning. The house began to feel occupied by something that never paid rent. Even the walls had grown cautious, creaking only when watched. Sunday came pale and wordless. The church bell in Kaifeck rang once for mass, and no one from the farm arrived. By evening, the postman noticed the chimney cold and unlit. He thought it strange, but kept his thoughts to himself. Days passed before the neighbors finally came to check. The dog barked hysterically, chained near the barn, hungry and half mad. They entered through the back door, calling names that sounded too loud. The silence answered with flies. In the barn, the lantern revealed a heap of straw darker than straw should be. Beneath it lay Andreas and Chiselia, their faces masked by congealed shadow. Beside them, the young girl's hand still reached outward, fingers curled mid-grasp. Her braid was tangled with hay, her mouth half open in surprise. The air stank of iron and something sweet. One of the cows lowed, long and miserable, as if calling for someone who could never return. Inside the house, the maid's body lay by the bed she had barely used. The candle beside her had melted into a shape like a question mark. In the cradle, baby Joseph slept no more. His blanket was pulled neatly to his chin, like someone had cared enough to tidy. The neighbors stumbled out, crossing themselves over and over. None spoke of the attic, though every head turned that way. The police came days later, late even for grief. They found tools arranged in order, as if the killer respected symmetry. The attic showed clear footprints in the dust, moving in circles. Someone had lived there for days, maybe weeks. Half-eaten bread and smoked meat sat near a pile of straw. Whoever it was had watched the family long enough to know their habits. One investigator said the walls still whispered when you stood quiet. The others laughed until they heard it too. They found axe marks on the doorframe that didn't match any of the farm's tools. The wood bled sap like an old wound reopening. Newspapers called it the Hinterkaifeck mystery before the bodies were even buried. Headlines liked tidy names for messy ghosts. Rumors spread that Andreas had enemies from the war. Others said his daughter's child was cursed by its true father. At night, villagers swore they still saw a lantern moving between the barn and the woods. It never reached either. The farm fell silent after the funerals. Only the dog remained for a time, barking at doors that no longer opened. Eventually, someone bought the land cheap and built a new house. The first night they slept there, they heard footsteps above the ceiling. The new owner claimed he found a child's braid under a floorboard. He buried it by the well and sold the property the next month. Local children dared each other to walk past at dusk. None made it farther than the gate before running home. A priest sprinkled holy water on the site and said the ground hissed. His candle went out though there was no wind. No suspect was ever convicted, no motive ever proven. Time itself seemed too frightened to dig deeper. The case files grew yellow in police archives. Margins filled with notes that read simply, "We heard it too." Years later, a soldier confessed on his deathbed to killing 6 in Bavaria. His details were wrong, but his voice shook like truth. Historians debated and detectives speculated, but the attic stayed empty, or so they claimed whenever the boards creaked. Visitors who came to study the site said the silence had weight. One journalist fainted when she heard faint humming in her recorder playback. An old neighbor, long widowed, said she still saw lantern light some nights. "It walks," she whispered, "but it never learns where to go." The remaining structure collapsed in the 1950s. People said the wind carried the dust straight back toward Kaifeck, yet no grass ever grew right where the barn once stood. The soil refused to forget. Tourists come now, snapping photos with nervous smiles. None stay after dark, no matter how bold. One man left his camera running overnight as a test. The footage showed the attic forming itself again out of shadow and breath. For 6 minutes, a figure could be seen walking in circles above the empty field. Its steps matched the rhythm recorded in 1922 witness reports. Then the figure stopped and looked directly at the lens. The camera battery drained in silence. When the man reviewed the audio, faint voices whispered his name. He had never said it aloud during the shoot. Police dismissed the video as forgery, but the man refused to sleep indoors afterward, dying 3 winters later in his car. Locals say the murders marked the edge of an old crossroads beneath the soil. Crossroads never forget bargains, only delay them. On cold nights, the wind over Hinterkaifeck still sounds like pacing. Some say it's the killer searching for a missing heartbeat. Others believe it's Andreas himself, counting the years he can't explain. Every step another apology swallowed by earth. The farmhouse foundation remains, moss-covered and humble. Yet when you step across it, the air trembles, polite but warning. Every decade, new investigators reopen the case for fame or curiosity. Each one dreams of footsteps overhead before they quit. One officer sealed a fragment of wood from the attic in evidence plastic. 3 days later, his home attic caught fire without a spark. Archivists whisper that the Hinterkaifeck file smells faintly of hay. Some nights, drawers slide open by themselves in the Munich records office. Legends say the killer stayed on the property for days after the murders. He fed the animals, milked the cows, and cooked meals for no one. Neighbors saw smoke rising from the chimney during that time. None dared to check, believing the farm was still alive. When police arrived, the beds were freshly made. Even the dishes had been washed and stacked neatly. Some said it proved guilt of madness, others called it devotion. The truth, like the attic, had too many corners. One theory blamed a vagrant with war trauma. Another blamed a ghost that needed company. The attic boards were reused by a carpenter who didn't believe in curses. A year later, he fell through a roof that wasn't supposed to break. The lantern from the barn sits now in a museum, unlit. Visitors claim it rattles when you mention the family's name. In the archives, the final photo shows the empty attic beams. If you zoom in, there's dust shaped like a man leaning forward. The curator insists it's a trick of light and resolution. Still, the image file corrupts every few months and must be replaced. At the old cemetery, the family's gravestones face west, against custom. The engraver said he didn't choose the direction, the ground did. Even now, winter birds refuse to perch on those stones. They fly circles instead, as if avoiding a pattern they can't see. Modern ghost hunters visit with thermal cameras and bravado. Their recordings always end the same, static and a faint lullaby. Locals tell them not to call it Hinterkaifeck out loud after dark. The word itself is a key, and some doors shouldn't open twice. Every story retold there adds one more step to the attic above. The past loves company, especially curious ones. Some nights the field smells briefly of fresh hay and blood. The wind carries both scents east toward no one in particular. If you listen closely, you might hear a hammer tap once, then stop. The kind of sound made by someone finishing a job they didn't want. The farmhouse is gone, the path overgrown. But when the moon leans low, it still outlines the roof that isn't there. A final report once claimed the murderer confessed in a dream. The priest who wrote it refused to wake again. Today the land is quiet, patient, resigned. But sometimes quiet is only the polite side of horror. Travelers who camp nearby say they hear steps circling their tents. Always 6 circles, never 7. In the empty field, wind hums through phantom rafters. The attic remains, invisible but listening, waiting for someone new to believe.